Welcome to Heek Sunt Draconis. Here be dragons. And finally, it is time to talk about ghosts. Well, specifically ghost hunters or paranormal investigators. This is a topic that has always kind of irked me. Not paranormal investigators per se. I've got no problem with hobbyists going out and investigating ghosts, regardless of how they do it, as long as they don't hurt anyone else in the process, which includes spreading false information. However, where I do get irked is where supposed science-based TV stations start promoting these guys in a way that makes them seem as though they are real scientists. And yes, anyone can sort of claim to be a scientist as long as they follow the scientific method, which these guys do not do. So, are they really scientists? Are they just nerds that are really curious about ghost stories? Or are they just liars and frauds, trying to gain more followers or believers by appearing to be legitimate? I'll let you decide after diving a bit deeper into this. The scientific method. The scientific method is the process of objectively establishing facts through testing and experimentation. The basic process involves making an observation, forming a hypothesis, making a prediction, conducting an experiment, and finally analyzing the results. If this was the scientific method for idiots, I would explain it as such. You see something interesting and you conduct some experiments. You then use the repeatable physical evidence you gathered to make an educated guess as to what might be going on, or a hypothesis. Then, based upon the repeatable evidence you gathered, you can make a prediction based upon your guess. If your guess is right, the prediction will also be right. You then perform an experiment to verify if your prediction was right. Then, you challenge all your soon-to-be ex-buddies to use the data you gathered to make you into a liar. If they can't do this, then woohoo! You now have a theory. But don't worry, everyone will keep trying to make you into a liar. This is just how science works, and people are very motivated to make you a liar, since they get prizes for doing so. This is how we ensure that our information is accurate and real. The most important part of the scientific method is to collect all of the data and analyze the data as objectively as possible. This is very hard for humans to do. We have a thing known as confirmation bias, meaning when we are hoping for an outcome to be something specific, we have a tendency to see evidence pointing to that outcome while ignoring evidence that doesn't. This goes for everything, not just ghosts, and it's best demonstrated by flat earthers. Paranormal investigator. The act of searching for ghosts alone violates the core values of the scientific method. They should simply be investigating a place with odd things being reported. And instead of using just ghost hunting tools, which were never designed or even verified to do what they are claimed to do in terms of ghost hunting, they should have other tools that can help to show alternative causes. Or they should be using those tools for the reasons they were originally intended for, along with however they use them for ghost hunting. That way they can collect all of the data, which, to be honest, is very tedious, boring, and has a habit of weeding out true scientists from fake ones. The way ghost hunters go about it by collecting only evidence for or against ghosts is very biased. They will never find alternative causes, and they don't want to find alternative causes, as it's going to reduce viewership. Virtually all ghost hunter groups claim to be scientific, and most give that appearance because they use high-tech scientific equipment, such as Geiger counters, electromagnetic field detectors or EMF, ion detectors, infrared cameras, super sensitive microphones. Yet, the equipment is only as scientific as the person using it. You may own the world's most sophisticated thermometer, but if you are using it as a barometer, your measurements are worthless. Just as using a calculator doesn't make you a mathematician, using a scientific instrument doesn't make you a scientist. The electromagnetic field detector, EMF detector. At a random haunted location, an investigator states, strong, erratic, fluctuating EMFs are common among ghosts. But does that mean EMFs are a sign that ghosts are around? No one has ever documented an actual ghost, so no one has ever verified a correlation between EMFs and real ghosts. However, real scientists have found a connection between EMFs and perceived ghosts. The connection between supernatural appearances and EMFs was theorized by Michael Persinger, a neurologist at Laurentian University in Canada. In one of his studies, he described the experiences of a teenager who, in 1996, claimed to get nocturnal visits from the Holy Spirit. Persinger's group found that an electronic clock near the 17-year-old's bed generated strong electromagnetic pulses with waveforms resembling those found to trigger epileptic seizures. Removing the clock stopped the girl's visions. Persinger theorized that the clock, in combination with mild brain damage that the girl had sustained prior, were likely contributing to the perceived ghostly apparitions. Persinger has done a lot of research on how electromagnetic stimulation of the frontal lobes of the brain can induce feelings of a sensed presence. However, the downside is that the field levels involved must be pretty high and are usually generated by having a subject wear special headgear, sometimes dubbed the God helmet. Experiments with lower levels of EM stimulation, as might arise when someone wanders around the room, having been somewhat controversial. Research groups have mostly been unable to see any ghostly hallucinations under such circumstances, though Persinger claims to have some success in this area. This is how science works. Until we have enough physical evidence, and no one can find a way of using that evidence to prove us to be liars, then, and only then, do we step forward and say, EMFs make us see fake ghosts. Until then, we simply provide what evidence we have. Paranormal investigators don't stop and go, we could have a ghost, or we could have something generating EMFs and causing hallucinations, similar to those in seizures. They just go straight to ghosts, ignoring the rest of the data they collect. Granted, not all of them do try to use the evidence to say this is proof that ghosts are real, but most do. Thermal cameras. So it should be noted that thermal imaging cameras don't measure air temperature, only the surface of objects. And I don't know how many times I've seen ghost hunters pointing at something and saying that the air around this area just dropped in temperature. They are also very susceptible to reflections off walls and other objects, as well as not working well at a distance. I have my own thermal camera, a neat one that is built into my FLIR brand multimeter, and while it is highly useful, it only works when pointing at the object you are measuring and keeping only that object in the screen. Once you have too much in the field of view, you get some really crazy results. They also need to be focused, and Fluke has this to say on its website. Focus is essential to both image quality and temperature accuracy. A blurry thermal image can disguise a critical temperature anomaly in a piece of equipment. An out-of-focus thermal image can produce a temperature measurement that's off by as much as 20 degrees, perhaps more. That significant temperature difference could lead you to an incorrect conclusion. The website even has this example, which shows a focused versus non-focused thermal camera. And the caption states, here, the focus is muddy. This reduces the clarity of the energy captured by the thermal camera and produces a measurement more than 76 degrees cooler than the in-focus image. This is part of the how-to manual for a thermal camera, so it must be a common occurrence, and ghost hunters routinely use large temperature differences, such as 70 degrees or so, as absolute proof of a ghost, because nothing else could cause that. Well, we just saw differently. With a visual image camera, we can take advantage of reflected light that tends to produce sharp contrast between objects. In thermography, we need to deal with energy that is emitted from the surface. It is unusual to have surfaces with sharp temperature differences next to each other. So, as heat energy moves through solids, liquids, and gases, crisp lines between objects disappear, making focus something very challenging to obtain. When it comes to ghost hunting, a ghost hunter is specifically looking for inconsistencies, such as those that you will see with an out-of-focus thermal camera. And instead of saying it could be out of focus, they say it's a ghost, even though no one has ever caught a ghost to measure how much they affect the environment thermally. It is simply a guess with nothing backing it up. And a guess is not part of the scientific method. High gain microphones. These are microphones that are incredibly sensitive. The first issue is something everyone is familiar with, though something we also love to disregard as it makes us question reality, which is never fun. Pareidolia, the tendency to perceive a specific, often meaningful image in a random or ambiguous visual pattern. The scientific explanation for some people is pareidolia, or the human ability to see shapes or make pictures out of randomness. This also applies to audio. It is especially good at showing us what we want to find. Audio recorders figure prominently in paranormal researchers' toolkits. Microphones capture ambient sounds during the investigation. Later, the audio recordings are scoured in search of messages from spirits. The premise is that audio recording devices can register otherwise inaudible communications from discarnate entities. These purported communications have been dubbed electronic voice phenomena, or EVP. The sounds are generally brief. Most examples consist of single words or short phrases. Perceived contents of EVP range from the threatening, "You're going to hell," to the bizarre, "Egypt air." Part of the attraction of the audio recorder for paranormal researchers is its apparent objectivity. How could a skeptic refute the authenticity of a spirit captured by an unbiased technical instrument? To the believers, EVP seems like incontrovertible evidence of communications from beyond. But recent research in the lab suggests that people don't agree much with what, if anything, they hear in those EVP sounds. A result is readily explained by the fallibility of human perception. They aren't always hearing something that doesn't exist. Audio recorders and high sensitivity mics, like all electronics, are susceptible to interference, such as radio signals. And when they are recording, they will record that interference. I'm sure many of you have heard of people with braces that are capable of picking up AM radio stations on occasion. No, well, it must be something popular in the 80s, but I assure you, it is a real thing that at least used to happen. So, what is the harm? Several studies have shown that people find paranormal research to be more credible and scientific when it is shown with technological tools, such as recording devices. Other evidence has suggested that opinion can outweigh scientific credibility when people evaluate pseudoscientific claims that were obtained through an electronic tool. So, that's going to do it for today. What do you think? Are these real scientists, nerds, or are they just liars and frauds? Maybe a mix? Let me know. If you enjoyed any of this information and would like to hear more on this topic, be sure to like the video and leave a comment. I am currently trying to find what kind of videos my audience most wants to hear before I take some really deep dives into topics that might just cause everyone to die of boredom, which is not good for any YouTube channel. I also promise that I will cover all topics you suggest unless it is simply impossible for any particular reason. As always, have a good day.